go?
I'm ready.
All right. This is Patrick Russell. I'm interviewing Vincent Warger for the first time. This interview is taking place in Miami on October the 11th, 2015. And the interview is being conducted by the Making History Project. Why don't we start with when you were born?
February 13th, 1925.
And where were you born?
Irvington, New Jersey.
And tell me briefly a little bit about your hometown.
Well, the town when I went into the service in '42, there were 60,000 people, and it's a suburb of Newark, and it was mostly a working man's town. How's that?
Okay. And how big was your family?
We had three boys and one girl.
All right. And what were you doing during the war?
I was a flight engineer on A-20 twin-engine light bomber.
Okay. And before the war, what were you doing?
I graduated from high school in June of '42, but I was 17, so I had a period to wait before I registered. So I worked from June of 1942 until I went into the service, May 8th, 1943. I'm not sure about that. It was almost a year. I was a toolmaker's apprentice in Newark.
Okay. And do you have any feelings about the U.S. getting involved in World War II?
Oh no, I was glad. Everybody couldn't wait to get into the service. So.
And were you enlisted or drafted?
I was drafted, but I was an enlisted man. Yeah.
Okay. And how did your family feel about you going to war?
Well, my mother didn't like it, but my dad just figured this is what's happened. Everybody was anxious to get into war in those days. The climate is totally different today, but everybody was anxious to get into the service. All the young men, you were either 4F or you were in the service, you know. So I was anxious. I was offered a 4-year scholarship for fencing at a nearby school, 4-year scholarship, and he said, Vince, we're going to give you a scholarship. This was Seton Hall College. We're going to give you a 4-year scholarship for fencing. And I said, well, I'm not interested. He said, why? I said, I'm going in the Army. And that's the way it was in those days. Typical of the way it was in those days.
All right, so you got drafted into the Army.
That's right.
And then you moved over to the U.S. Army Air Corps.
Well, as a result, when you're drafted, you go down to Fort Dix in New Jersey anyway, and they ask you questions and try and figure out what they're going to do with you. And one of the questions they asked me, what did you do when after you got out of high school? And I told them I was a toolmaker's apprentice. And then they gave me some questions about being a toolmaker's apprentice, and then they decided that I was going into the Air Force, and I went into the Air Force. But I don't remember what. I was going to work on airplane engines. That's in effect, that's what it was.
Okay. And where was your basic training?
Basic training was in Atlantic City in the Marlboro Blenheim Hotel.
Okay.
Atlantic City, yeah.
And how was basic training? How was it?
That was all basic training. Oh, it was fun. I mean, I was 18. I'm at a hotel on the boardwalk, and you're in the service, so I was happy as can be. You know.
Okay, walking around in your uniform?
Yeah, that's right. 18 years old on the beach. It was a great time. I'd never been away from home before.
Yeah. So what did you do during basic training?
What do we do in basic training? I think basic training is 90 days, and you learn how to become a member of a group. I think that's why I have heard that in basic training in the North, it's a little bit longer than basic training in the South, because in basic training in the South, you do what you're told quicker. But if basic training in the North, you want to know why I'm doing something. So I don't know whether that's true or not, but I suspect it is true. But you learn. And then all this business of marching and drilling, teaching you how to respond to command right away without thinking. I think that's the idea. So I like basic training. It was a lot of fun.
All right. And from Atlantic City, did you go anywhere else to do training?
Atlantic City, I think I went to Columbia, South Carolina. Then I went to Seymour, Columbia, South Carolina, and I went to Seymour Johnson School to become a flight engineer, and I think that was 3 months. And after flight engineer school, then I went to gunnery school over in Fort Myers, Florida, and that was for a couple of months, and you learn all about what they call deflection firing. In other words, it's just like shooting skeet. You pick up the bird, you go past the bird, and then you shoot, and that's what they try and teach you. They teach you, you spend a lot of time shooting skeet, so you learn that deflection firing. And then you start flying around in B-17s and gunnery training, because everybody that's on an airplane is a gunner. The pilot's a gunner, the bombardier's a gunner, I was a gunner, and the armorer was a gunner, getting the turret.
So how do you train to be a gunner?
Mostly, that part about Fort Myers and learning the deflection firing is a real big part about it. But I grew up with a shotgun. I hunted all my life, so I hunted birds mostly. I had my own bird dog, and you learn how to shoot, pick up the bird and go beyond the bird and then shoot. And that's what they teach you with that skeet shooting. So that's just part of gunnery training. And in the gunnery training, you get up in the B-17 mostly out of Fort Myers, and you shoot at targets. Usually the balloon or a sock is carried behind an airplane. You shoot at that, and you learn how to get along in a B-17, and you learn some first aid, and that's all I can remember. Yeah.
Okay. And what was your highest rank?
Sergeant.
Sergeant.
Yeah.
And you were a flight engineer.
Flight engineer.
So tell me a little bit about your duties and responsibilities in an airplane as a flight engineer.
What the idea originally was, I think, was that you're thinking about big airplanes. When something goes wrong in the engines, the flight engineer takes an active part in getting that engine going again. With the A-20, I was in the back of the airplane with the other guy, the other enlisted man, Jack Pickard, who was an armorer, and he had specialized training in armaments. And I went, of course, to flight engineer school, and I spent most of my time. You can't walk around in an A-20. I'm sitting on the floor most of the time, but I spent most of my time talking to the pilot about engine problems that come up, and mostly that was about it. Like one time, he was thinking about feathering an engine to save gas, and the A-20 burns 110 gallons of gas an hour, but it turns out that if you feather that engine, you're not going to save gas, you're going to use more gas, so the engine wasn't in that bad a shape where you could leave it go. That's about it.
All right, so in Fort Myers, you were training on a B-17.
Right, yeah.
And ultimately, though, you served on an A-20.
That's right.
And can you tell me the difference between the two planes?
The biggest difference is one has 4 engines and the other one has 2 engines, right? The A-20 was a light bomber, but most of my training, in fact all of it I think, was on Curtiss-Wright engines, which those are the big round engines. The other engines are the Pratt & Whitney engines, which are lengthwise engines. The A-20, it had 12 engines, a double rows of 6 each, and you had problems flying vapor locks in the training flights. You would, because of some particular problem, it would be sucking gas out of the airplane, and you're losing it out there. When you're flying around in these training missions, you can see that vapor lock and losing gas. You'd spot that thing. And I forget what else you asked me in the question. What else?
The difference between the B-17 and the A-20?
Only the size of the airplane, 4 engines versus 2. They were pretty much the same engine, I think. Yeah.
So was the A-20 faster?
Oh, sure. Yeah. The A-20, we used to cruise, I think, a couple hundred miles an hour. Now, I'm not sure that we got a full bomb load. All of us weighed about between 150 and 200 pounds. And a full bomb load consists of 4 500-pound bombs, or plus one under each wing. And we could also carry a couple of 260-pound frag bombs, which are fragmentation bombs. And they're the bombs that you used to plant around bridges and everything. And they had a bomb that they call gee, where do I remember this? A pineapple. And a pineapple is a bomb which is unusually sensitive, and they plant them around bridges. And God help the people that if you disturb the ground, a pineapple explodes and it kills everybody. So we'd be flying up at night, and usually the lieutenant would tell us, in briefing for the mission, tell us that the convoys are spread out tonight because it's a full moon, and they're not bumper to bumper because the airplanes, the truck drivers used to try and keep as close as they could to the truck in front of them because it had a little green light underneath. Only the driver of the behind truck could see that green light, but that's the way they followed each other. But at this stage of the war, the Germans didn't much care. You know, they just drove their car, and they weren't even shooting back at us, to tell you the truth, because we would go down some of those convoys and we could shoot them up. You know, I never did that. We never had to do that. Other missions, sometimes Italy was divided into 5 zones at that point in the war, and I don't know how many months before that it was divided, but 5 zones. But the 47th Bomb Group was in those 5 zones every night. And you might go up there one night looking for what they call targets of opportunity, as opposed to a specific assignment like a bridge. But sometimes you'd get up in there in one of the zones and you'd be flying along, and all of a sudden, as you're flying north, we were south, as you're flying north in Italy, there are 2 stations, one on each side of Italy. One was Bacon and the other was Commander. These are radar stations that track every airplane that's in northern Italy. So as you go north, one airman back at the base, one lineman had the responsibility of setting a particular code on your airplane that you took off on that night on 1-5. And as you approached these 2, Bacon or Commander, you would call in and tell them 1-5 signing in, and they would already have you on a chart. And so they'd just say Roger 1-5. But then, so that any airplane that is not checked in, not sending that message, he's a bogey. So they would notify us right away there's a bogey, and he's flying at such a speed, at such an altitude. And we A-20s are supposed to get away from him because we had our own job. We weren't supposed to shoot down fighters, right? So one night we got Stu. We were just flying along, and we had already passed the bomb line, so we could drop our bombs at that point forward. And we were told that our Friedsprat 1-5, Friedsprat was our call sign for 12th Air Force, 84th Bomb Squad. So Friedsprat 1-5, you are at such and such an altitude, at such and such a heading, you carried such and such a bomb line, right, 10-4, right. So they say, all right, in 5 minutes you're going to get a ringing sound in your ears. As soon as you hear that, open up your bomb bays. You continue on, and as soon as that ringing stops, you drop your bombs and then get out of there. But stay on the radio so that we can contact you if we have to. We don't want any chatter, literally. So we would do that. It happened to us once or twice. We just drop our bombs and go home. And
so they would tell you, they would give you a signal. It wouldn't be up to the pilot where to drop?
We would all hear the signal. I mean, the pilot the bombardier is the guy that actually drops the bombs, yeah. And all of us hear the signal, but we just, it's curious. You want to wonder what the hell's going on, and what's going on. Was it a partisan thing or what? But anyway, that happened to us twice. But
so they told you to drop your bombs somewhere else than where you were playing?
Yeah, we would have, on this particular night, you would look for targets of opportunity. In other words, we did not have a specific target. So we would fly around all night long and either look for convoys or look for a bridge. We could blow up the bridge if we want, or they would give us a particular target. Usually they were bridges or convoys. But this particular night, we were just flying along, and all of a sudden we could hear, because we're all on the phones, right? And we could hear Friedsprat 1-5, and Stu would answer, yeah, 1-5. It's okay. you're carrying such and such a bomb load, and you're at such and such an altitude, and you're such and such a speed. Continue that speed. Just continue doing what you're doing, because in 5 minutes you're going to hear a ringing. Then once the ringing starts, open the bomb base. When the ringing stops, drop the bomb, go home. So that happened twice.
Okay. And how many crew members are in your A-20?
4. Pilot, bombardier, armorer gunner who was up in the turret, and a flight engineer and me.
All right, so it's a small crew.
Small crew, right.
Smaller plane. And how many are in a B-17?
B-17 was 10. Yeah, 10 men. Everyone that went down was 10 men. Yeah.
Is there an altitude difference between the two planes that they fly?
No. Once you went over 10,000 feet, technically, I mean, the law was that you go on oxygen because of, what do they call it? You can't respond. Once you get over anoxia, how do I remember that? Once you go over 10,000 feet and the air is thinner, you get less oxygen, you don't respond to command. They tell you, I volunteered when I was in the tower, in this room, and anyway, they said, somebody take you, we all had masks on, and they said, somebody take off your mask. I took mine off. He said, oh, tie your shoe. I couldn't tie my shoe. That's what happens to you when you don't get enough oxygen. So once we went over 10,000 feet, we had to put on the mask, oxygen mask, and B-17, most of the time we were under 10,000 feet. I think all the time. I can't remember many occasions at all we ever put on it. We never flew with the oxygen mask on all the time. I didn't anyway. Because we were, did I already tell you that and beginning September, the previous September, there were no more day missions for the 47th Bomb Group, which are 4 squads, 4 bomb squads, 84th, 85th, 86th, 97th, yeah. And so we flew all-night missions.
Okay. And in your A-20, the pilot was by himself in the cockpit?
Right.
And where were you seated?
I was behind him. There's 3 hatches. The bombardier has a door which drops, and he climbs into the nose and closes the door, right? Closes the hatch. The pilot has to climb up a little ladder, and then he climbs into the seat, and he has a hatch about 3 feet long over his head, which he releases in case of an emergency by pulling this little knob overhead. And I was in the bottom. If you looked at the plane from profile, I was below the. I got in through the bottom, and sat on the bottom. And Pickard usually got in ahead of me because he was in the turret, and I would usually forgot these damn parkas because they were nice and warm. He had an awful job he had a tough job getting up in that turret anyway. But once you got the parka, it was really bad.
Okay. And did you do any training while overseas? Or did you get all your training stateside?
Yeah, I don't think we ever had. We never had. Well, I don't know if you want me to bring this up, but I told you that we got overseas December 6th on a ship. Samuel Griffith was the name of the Liberty ship. We got overseas on December 6th, and I got assigned to the 47th Bomb Group.
What year was that? December 6th?
December 6th, well, the war was over May 8th, 1945. So this had to be December 6th, 1944. Okay. January, February, March, April, May. That's right. So, where the heck was I? I'm 90. I forget every once in a while. I forget where it was.
You got over there in December?
Oh, yeah, December. Okay. So we hung around. I wasn't doing anything, so I volunteered. I learned how to type in high school. So I went down to the orderly room or to the headquarters, which was a small tent where the brass was, where the outfit. And there's a Major Willie there, and I asked Major Willie if the pilot was getting any orientation flights. And he said, "What orientation flights?" I thought the reason why we were hanging around so long since December 6th until January, I think I flew my first mission in January. Yeah, I think that's right. And I thought the reason was the pilot was getting some kind of an orientation flight to find out where you do fly and where the you know, what an orientation flight would be. He said, no, there's no such thing. So I didn't think we got any orientation.
And again, you belong to what unit again?
The 84th Bomb Squad. There was the 84th, 85th, 86th, and 97th. We all flew A-20s. There were a few A-26s, and there were a couple of P-61 or P-63. They were night fighters. They were all guns, you know, twin engine.
And you were part of the 47th Bomb Group.
Group, right.
Okay.
They were the longest outfit over. I'm sorry?
Was the 12th Air Force?
Yes, 12th Air. The 47th was the longest group overseas of any Air Force. They landed in North Africa and they chased the Germans all the way across North Africa.
All right. And so in December of 44, you arrive in Italy?
Italy, right.
Do you remember what town?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember which town? Where did you
No.
station?
Yeah, we were in Caserta, Caserta, just outside of Naples.
All right. And is that where you spent the whole war based on?
No. That was just a landing point. Then we got assigned to the 47th Bomb Group, and that was up in Grosseto, 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 Italy. Nice little town. Fortunately, they had an air base outside of town, and that was where the 47th Bomb Group was.
And that's where you spent the whole war?
The whole war, right.
Based out of there. All right, and all your missions that you flew were all in Italy?
All in Italy, yeah.
Okay. And what type of equipment were you qualified to use on an airplane?
What type of equipment was I qualified to use? The only equipment that they had was that 50 caliber machine gun, and we never used that. It was stored in there. In case we needed it, but we never used it.
So you were mostly there to fix engine problems?
We talked about engines, yeah. I talked about when he had a problem, we'd talk it over, the pilot and I, you know. But we never had any serious problems, except that night when the thing went on fire.
All right, so you went on, you say 21 missions or
27?
27 missions.
Yeah.
All right, and describe and these are night missions?
Yeah, they're all night missions. That's all. Yeah. From September, I'm pretty sure it was 44. From September, I got overseas in December. From September prior to that, there were no more day missions for the 47th. Anyway,
for that?
Do I remember that?
No, was there a reason for that? Why?
No, God knows. I just don't know the reason for that. Yeah.
Okay. And describe a typical mission.
Well, I've already described one with the CIA, where the two radar stations would call us and tell us when to open the bomb bays. Other missions we would drop, we would have specific targets, maybe a bridge or a building, and we dropped our, depending on what kind of a bomb load, 400 or 500 pounders, one under each wing. We didn't like that one under each wing bit because if the pilot pressed a toggle switch in his compartment, and with pressing that toggle switch, they're both supposed to release, but a couple times only one release. So he's got a 500-pound bomb pulling a small airplane with not much wing to sustain it, you know. So they'd get killed. They'd spin in. But we planted bombs around bridges and blew up buildings and or did those special targets. That's about it. Yeah.
All right, and prior to going out on the mission, was there some sort of a briefing?
Oh yeah, we always had there was always a big, well, okay, the briefings were always early, like 8 o'clock at night. And they would be held in this big tent, which was a mess tent. Never enough chairs to go around, benches. We'd sit on benches, and there was always, up as you face the stand where the briefing officer was, over to my left there would be a great big map with a plastic cover on it. and there's a red line and a black line on that thing. So you drop your bombs anytime past the red line, right? You can't drop your bombs this side of that. And so we always, the first thing you did when you walked into the mess went for the briefing was you'd look over at that map, and then over here there was another chart, and it tells each crew what plane they were in, and we were always in 1-5. Well, we only had 6 missions, and the 6th mission it blew up, right? Burned up. So we'd be in different airplanes. It'd be the pilot and the bombardier and the crew, and the mission, and the bombardier or the mission, the briefing officer would give you a little history about the progress of the war, and that was always the biggest thing we were interested in. And then he would tell us, we've got some of you people, he would name them, the airplane, you have specific targets, and the rest of you are just in targets of opportunity. Is that what you asked?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And what was the feeling that you had going into each mission? Was there a sense of nervousness or excitement or something else?
No, I can't honestly say I was ever nervous about it, because if there were the only thing you had to worry about was a bogey that was up there, and the Germans didn't have that many airplanes anyway. They did have, on one mission, there's an airplane, I like airplanes, so there was a German airplane, I think it's the ME-262, but it was a jet airplane. And it had such limited duration of a flight, but at one time went through our flight, and you saw it go zooming right through, because it was leaving a contrail, a white contrail. You saw the thing zoom through. Didn't shoot, didn't do anything. But for me, I was facing the rear of the airplane, so therefore it came from left to right. The rest of the crew said it came from right to left, and they said, "What the hell, Warger, what are you? You're confused." And I said, "I was just turned around." But anyway, you had 2 ports on the side of the airplane. You could look out and see things. And radar and Bacon always picked up any bogey that was in the area, and they had what they called the Desert Air Force, and the Desert Air Force job was specifically to go after any bogeys that were in the area. So if there was a bogey, and all the time that I was in there was one bogey, and there was a lieutenant whose name was Puttkamer, and he was an old timer. And they said, "Puttkamer, he's coming in your direction." So, but Desert Air Force interfered right away and said, "We're getting him, Puttkamer. We'll take care of it." So that was their job. We had to let him go. But we never heard what went on. The further discussion between the radar stations and Desert Air Force.
You were telling me earlier about this incident in which you were helping your colleague out of a turret.
Oh yeah.
And the plane
Okay.
was actually filling up with smoke, or you smelled something.
Yeah, right. That was our 6th mission.
Why don't you tell me about the famous 6th mission? What happened?
6th mission. That was February 23rd, 1945. We had a full bomb load, and we had a full crew. We had a bombardier flying with us that night too. So as we started approaching, nothing unusual happened all the way up there. It was usually about an hour between takeoff and getting the bomb line. The bomb line was an imaginary line horizontally across Italy, and you did not drop your bombs anywhere this side of that bomb line. So that's what a bomb line is. So we were approaching the bomb line, and also, in addition to the bomb line, there was a huge X, and it was made out of floodlights. And those floodlights were just in addition to reminding you that you're approaching the bomb line. So every night when we approached the bomb line, we were fired on, because the infantry troops down below would shoot, and every so many bullets as a tracer, and those tracers would come up and not reach us, of course, because we're up at 10,000 feet, right? And they're shooting rifle bullets. But of course, they had bad experiences in the past, and they don't know who's flying above them, and so they shot anyway. but we used to see that all the time. But, oh yeah, in an 820, we had a Stewart Warner heater, and they had a reputation for going on fire, so we never used the Stewart Warner heater. As a result of that, it was cold, and it was the coldest winter that they had ever had in history in Italy. And when we were flying, we were usually up 8 or 10,000 feet, and it was really cold. So we left the hatch open because in case we had to get out, because we had no Stewart Warner heater. And then on that mission, I think it was either that mission or one before it, they had just issued us parkas, and they were almost knee length, but they were nice and warm. We were so glad to get them. But then when Pickard got the parka on him, and he tried to climb up into that Martin turret full of ammunition cans, and he had to get himself in there and stand up and put his feet on a bar that was outside the ammunition cans and brace himself so I could push the seat up underneath him. And he stuck in there. And so, of course, we had emergency procedures. So I told Pick, brace yourself, Pick, because we have to get out of the airplane. So I would hit his foot. That meant, brace yourself, I'm going to drop your seat. And when I dropped the seat, there were 2 hooks on either side. And I pushed the wire down. Those 2 hooks opened up. The seat dropped down. I got Pickard out of there. But on this night, oh, well, all right, I'll go. As soon as, when we got the word, when the klaxon horn went on, it rings so loud, that means get out of the airplane. I tried to contact Stu, and there was no answer. There was no communication between Stu and I. So
Stu is the pilot.
Stu is the pilot, yeah.
Right, and so a horn goes off, and that's an alarm.
And he set that. He threw that switch. That's right. It's a klaxon, C-L-A-X-T-O-N.
You wanted to know what was going on.
Right. I wanted to know what was going on. No, and he didn't answer.
All right.
He had pulled out his plug, I guess, his connection. So anyway, then I grabbed my parachute and I put it on. It was in between the ribs, the side of the airplane, and that's where I stored mine. And I had Pickard's chest pack on this side between the ribs, and the hatches in between. So as I grabbed mine and put the chute on, I looked out the hatch and I see, as I said, as clearly as I'm looking at you, I see 2 parachutes, gleaming white parachutes. And I said, oh my God. That to me meant, gee, this is it, get the hell out of there. We've got to get the hell out. Meanwhile, I have Pickard. And I don't know what it is, but I just knew maybe he was going to be a problem, up in that turret. Because we didn't get along, and he was a funny guy.
But he was also stuck up there with the pilot.
He's stuck up there in the pilot. You'd think he'd be nice to that, because some guys got out of that turret and jumped out and never helped the guy on the bottom. So they were famous too. But so anyway, Pickard. Now those 2 chutes, gleaming white. Then I see them, and I get Pickard's chute. I tapped his foot, dropped his seat, and he came out in a bunch. And I had because of that big parka, and I got him out of that parachute, out of that turret, which was not easy. Meanwhile,
so he's above you.
Now he was above me when he is above me, but he's practically on my level. His body was on my level when he was sitting in the turret. But when he got out, I did get him out of there, but when he looked at me and he was dribbling, and his eyes were glassy. I never knew what glassy eyes meant until I saw that. His eyes were there, but there was no expression in them. And he was dribbling, and he was saying, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. So I hollered at him, because he and I never had too much conversation, but I hollered at him, put that goddamn chute on, Pickard. And he came around a little bit, but I guess he came around enough, because he did end up parachuting out. But then I got his chute on him. But let me just tell you, those 2 parachutes that I saw, we were heading straight north. Those two parachutes landed, if that was the pilot and the bombardier who it had to be, or else what was it? They would have been south of me. Turned out they were way up north of where they would have landed if that had been Stu and Pickard. So then I got my parachute. I got the chute unpicked. Then I looked around and saw that I had done as much for him as I could, and so I turned around, knelt down. Oh, and rather than admit that I was scared, I had turned on the cabin light. We had a little cabin light, which lit up that little cabin. I turned around and I turned off that light, but I said, when you go back now, you got to go out. And when I'm back to kneel down, I blessed myself and I bailed out. And it was just so nice and quiet and everything when you're in the parachute. And it's really nice. It was cold, but full moon, you could see everything.
Now you're parachuting over enemy territory.
No, we were so close to the bomb line that I could see those guys were shooting up at me, right? That meant we were right on the border. So when I landed on the ground, what are you going to do? I said, am I this side or north or south of the bomb line? So I waited. I landed in a grove of grapes, a grape grove. So it collapsed my parachute, right? So I gathered up my parachute and I just sat there and I said, what I'll do is watch the airplanes that go over. I'll see how many of them have their lights lit on, because you're supposed to turn your lights off. Once you go on the other side, your lights are supposed to be off. So 3 out of the 5 had their lights off. So I said, I'm safe. Really, that's the way I figured it out. What were we talking about? The Pickard, I got him out of there, yeah.
And he landed?
Yeah, Pickard said when he landed, the only thing he remembered at all was seeing the soles of my shoes. But he remembers nothing about being stuck in the turret or me putting a chute on him, nothing. Then he said he ended up in a hospital. Oh, the night when he landed, the partisans got a hold of him, and we had, on our chest pack, we had some kind of a thing. It wasn't heroin, but it was some kind of a pain pill, and a needle. So the partisan took that off and shot Pickard with this tranquilizer of some kind. And he went to sleep, and he ended up in the 110th Station Hospital in Pisa. And all he remembered was that the next day he woke up, and there's an officer who he said is a medical officer, U.S. Army, pink shirt, green slacks, captain, and a medical insignia. And he's rolling dice on Pickard's bed. And then he says to Pickard, "Who are your next of kin?" So it didn't take much to knock Pickard out, but he lost it completely again.
Okay.
So I don't know, a couple of days later they put him on a truck, got him back home.
And what about you? So you landed in this grape grove, and
Oh yeah,
what happened? How'd you get out of there?
Oh, no problem. The rest of the thing is really a nice story. But anyway, I could see as you're floating down, I could see a house over here, and then I saw a small house over here. So I was dying of thirst. My throat was so dry, and I started walking toward that house, and I could hear a stream. Don't forget, I'm way up northern Italy now, where the mountains are really mountains. And this little stream is running by, and I heard it, and I knelt down, and there was a nice puddle there, so I took my handkerchief out, and I stuck it, took a drink anyway. But then this little house was there, and it's about a one-car garage size, right? There's nothing but branches in there. So the Italians have everything, telephone poles and everything else were stone over there. So they cut all the branches of the trees that were around. There's not many trees, in spite of the fact that we're up in the mountains right there. But yeah, they saved all the branches and everything. So, then I left, after I saw that, I left and I walked over to that house that I saw. So I couldn't find a door. So I walked around all the house, and I couldn't find any door. I said, how the hell did they get in there? So I could see was one window, and it was a wooden window. So I took a big stone, I threw it up, and I hit the window, and I hit that door, and that pane. So this guy, little Italian, sticks his head out, and he's hollering and screaming. And he had a hat like Santa Claus would wear, with a white ball at the end of his hat, and GI underwear, all the way buttoned up all the way here, and he's hollering at me. And all the time, since I got in Italy, I started trying to learn Italian, so I know when they're going to shoot me, right? So I asked him, how far away are the Tedeschi's? Tedeschi in Italian means German. And he said, no Tedeschi's. No Tedeschi. So he slammed his door. That was enough. I figured I'm safe anyway, right? So I just went back and laid my parachute on a whole bunch of those sticks that were in that little house. I made a bed, put my parachute on it, put my hat down on the ground. I had US on it, and went to sleep. I woke up, that was about 10 o'clock. I woke up the next morning at 7 o'clock, bright day, nice clear day. We were up so high, the P-47s that were flying up on missions were almost level with me. That was how high we were up in the mountains. So
how'd you find your way back to your base?
All right. I don't mind telling this story, but it's, I decided that I better take my flying boots with me because I could use them for barter. I left my parachute silk there for some poor Italians are going to all of a sudden think that they're really wealthy because they got this pure silk parachute there, and I left it there. And I grabbed my parachute harness. I took that back with me and left the parachute, and I started walking, and I see a road, and I could hear a car. And all of a sudden, around a turn comes this car, and I got out in the road, and I put up my hands like this, and this guy is getting out of his car all of a sudden, all at the same time, and he said, Partigiani, partisan, Italiano, partigiani. So I said, okay. He comes at me, and he comes running over and gives me a big abrazo, and I tell him I parachuted the night before, and I said, I got to get back to Grosseto. He says, okay, andiamo. He said, get in my truck. His truck was like a 32 Chevrolet sedan. They cut off the back and made a platform on there. But there were no handles or anything. So I go over there and I jump on the back of this truck and put my I put my harness on there and my boots. And he had turned off his engine, right? So we start drifting. We're going down this, don't forget I was up there so high, the P-47s were on the same level. So we start drifting down this huge mountain, God. And tires are screeching, and as you got near the edge, my God, it looked like a couple miles down below there. It was huge. And I'm trying to hold on to something. I was holding on to the sides all the time. So that lasted for about 15 minutes. Finally, we pull up to this little town, and there's a railroad track coming through this way. We stop just beside the railroad track, and up there's a little store, some stores, like little neighborhood stores. So all of a sudden, the people come out of the stores, and this guy, Luigi, I think his name was, he's yelling this story. We got an Americano who parachuted last night, dropped out. And so everybody comes running out, and there must have been 50 people there. And they take me back up to the store, and they had some kind of stuff which they were drinking. And of course, they give me a drink of that stuff, and it was, I called it tree bar coffee. It was awful. Gee. But I drank it down because they were so glad they were trying to help me. And they put me on a train, and somebody got on a train with me. I made 3 train switches, but there was always somebody on the train with me, some kid. The trains weren't trains, they were flat cars, and at the end of each flat car, there was a thing that ran across the car. And it was all glass, except the back, that was wood, and the front was all glass. And they always put a kid up there with me, and we'd go on for so long, and then jump off. I'll keep it, Vincenzo. We got to get off. So we got off, the kid got off with me, and some other kid had come along, jump on a train with me, go someplace else, do the same thing all over. And finally we get down to, I see a property guard fence. So that means we're going to have some kind of American installation that turned out to be a British installation. And there was a Brit and a GI, and they had stopped I was in a car now. They had stopped the car. Yeah, how did I get in the car? Well, anyway. Yeah, they said, then the Brit come up, and I jumped, they carried my stuff, put me in the car. The Brit said to me, have you ever been to England? I said, no, but my grandfather's from England, but I never knew him. And that was nice. And then the American said, they had heard that there was a plane that went down last night, and I was on that plane. It took me over to put me in the British post, whatever the hell it was. But they took me inside this mess hall, and apparently all the British GIs are scraping these, using wire brushes and then milk. And they were scrubbing the tables with those wire brushes and milk, and I almost gagged. It smelled awful. So I turned around and walked the hell out of there, and they said, "Aren't you hungry?" I said, "No." So, and a British officer came over and introduced himself, and he said, "We've got a convoy going south of Grosseto, so if you can jump on." So I jumped on the back, and he came over a couple minutes later with some cookies, about a half a dozen cookies, and it was almost the whole day that we rode all day long back to Grosseto. They dumped me off, and the trucks were coming from the line going back to the base. We were about a half hour or 20 minutes away from the base where we lived in the tents up in a grape orchard, in an olive orchard. And so, 20 minutes to get down to the line. So they were on their way back, and I stopped them in the middle of the road. They said, "What are you doing out here, kid, with that harness?" I was in 1-5 that went down last night. So then I was a big hero, and put me in a truck, and back to the base, and that was it. Yeah.
So it took you how long?
How long to get back? Well, from the time that I jumped out? Oh, all right. All in the same day. Well, I slept that night, right? So the next morning I got up and the guy came down with his car. So it was the next day. By that evening I was back at the base, yeah. Now, the pilot and the bombardier weren't back at the base yet, and neither was Smitty. I was the only one to come back. They say, "Where are the other guys?" How do I know? You know?
But eventually you all met up?
Oh, yeah, we all met up about 2 or 3 days later, yeah.
You all went out again as a crew?
We did, yeah, that's right. That was our 6th mission, and we flew 27, so okay. We flew all the rest of them, yeah. If you I got a week off. It's not because of any of this business of readjusting yourself, all that nonsense. There was a shortage of airplanes. There was something that's the only reason I didn't fly, so I was off for a week. But so was the pilot, Bombardier and Smitty, and Pickard. Oh, that's it.
Okay. And then you finished your 27 missions, and then in December of 45, you were going back home?
No. August of 45, I went back home. Yeah.
August.
Yeah, we finished our last mission. Well, the last mission was, the war ended May 8th. So, and I jumped out in February 23rd. So between, I still had six from 18 missions to go, right? I flew them all in that time.
And all in Italy?
All in Italy, all night, yeah.
Okay. All right. And is there anything else you would like to add to your interview? Anything else significant?
No.
Important?
No, I had, as I told you in the beginning, I wanted to be a pilot so bad. But I figured I was going to outfox them. I was going to go to gunnery school. I already went to flight engineer school, so I said, well, that was great because I don't know what's going on with those engines. And that was fine because I am sort of mechanical too. So then I went to flight engineer, to gunnery school, and I had my choice in that, but I took the aviation cadet exam. And I got the second highest mark in the 3rd Air Force Training Command. And the sergeant said, "Kid, they closed the program, but you're on your way. You got such a high score, second highest score in the 3rd Air Force Training Command that consisted of all southeastern United States." So he said, "I'm going to try and put you through." So there was a general's son. The general's son, the general's name was McCulloch, or some Irish name. So the two of us were on a train the next day, or a couple of days later, going up to Biloxi, Mississippi. I think it was Biloxi. I'm not sure. But we got off the train, and there was a big MP there. And he said, "What the hell are you guys doing?" I said, "We're going to aviation cadet school." He said, "The hell you are." He said, "It's closed. You're going back." So I rode the train back to Fort Myers. And then we went from Fort Myers, we went overseas. I never did get to pilot school.
Yeah, almost. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for spending the time.
Okay, my pleasure.
thank you for your service.
You're welcome.